Hey folks, and welcome back to the channel. Today I just want to do a really quick video on a product that I thought was really cool, and so I bought it and I'm here to review it. Before we get into the product, I just want to say one thing. As many of you know, the UK is back into a full another lockdown, the third one of its kind. So that means two things. That means one, there's going to be many more hat videos because my hair is atrocious right now and I can't go to the barbers to get it cut. And secondly, it just means that I'm going to have to shoot many more videos inside, which is kind of a bummer because I have lots of different plans of things I want to do. But, you know, it's a pandemic, so you just got to make do. Okay, so the product today that I want to talk about is the Deltahub mouse wrist rest, if you will. I suppose that's the right term. So I didn't actually have much of a background of Deltahub themselves. I've actually, until a few weeks ago, never heard of them. But I actually started to see them crop up on a few Instagram adverts quite frequently, and then all of a sudden I started to notice that quite a few of the YouTubers that I watch also had the wrist rest themselves. And from the design itself, it kind of screams out at you. It's very different, it's something very unique because most mouse wrist rests are usually inbuilt as part of mouse mats. And without being mean, a lot of wrist rests aren't very cool. I know that sounds a funny thing to say, but a lot of wrist rests are just kind of, you know, like the tacky ones that you get in school or in the offices, and they're just kind of like a lump at the end of the mouse mat, and they just kind of fit your wrist, and they're not really that comfortable. But this one's really unique because, as you can see, it's freeform. So the idea being that it will fit into your wrist and you can actually move it with your mouse. So it is quite unique in that regard. So instantly with this design, something like this will always really appeal to me because I like innovation and I like seeing new things. And as far as I'm aware, there aren't many mouse wrist rests like this, so that's why I took the plunge and decided to buy it. Now you may be asking yourself, well, why would I need a wrist rest? You can understand maybe a keyboard, but why a mouse wrist rest? Well, as we all know, carpal tunnel is an absolute bitch. And thankfully for me, even though surprisingly I work so many hours at a desk, thankfully so far, touch wood, I actually don't suffer from carpal tunnel, but I know some family members that do, and I know it affects millions upon millions of people every year. And the fact we're now working from home, I actually wouldn't be surprised if there's some more cases of repetitive strain injuries or carpal tunnel or bad backs or bad necks. Now everyone's starting to use their own devices at home and not having proper office equipment. Okay, so the unboxing experience itself is really quite cool. It's a nice little cardboard box, and inside you get some leaflets telling about the information of the wrist rest and the company, but also you get a really nice pouch. It's like a very nice soft pouch, and full credit to them, they easily could have just put it in a very plain plastic case or cardboard cutout, but instead it comes in a nice cloth, so should you ever want to transport it around with you, if you travel for work a lot, you know that it's secure in that pouch, so major props for that. Okay, so if we're going to get onto the actual product itself, the wrist rest itself is quite unique. So the base itself is actually made out of plastic, and the pads on top are somewhat rubber-like. So if you can imagine, it's quite firm but also very soft to rub against, which obviously makes sense with it being a wrist rest. Now on Deltahub's website, they actually claim that they worked with physicians to design these pads to fit the human wrist, and you can definitely feel like that. It doesn't feel like a hack job. I know I've got quite large wrists, and when I place my wrist in this rest, it does seem to fit it really quite well, and you can actually move your wrist from left to right, and you can really find that sweet spot of what is comfortable. Now if you go on their website, or if you go on their Instagram page, you'll notice that the mouse that they link with this mouse wrist rest is the Logitech MX Master 3. Now that's no surprise because the mouse is absolutely fantastic, and I'm not surprised that they use this mouse because you can tell that the target audience is very much people that would own a productivity mouse like this. And the two together kind of go like bread and butter, like they just work so well, and they just look very similar to one another, and they just flow really well. And I'm lucky enough to own an MX Master 3 mouse, so I've experienced this and it does feel great. One of my complaints with the MX Master 3 is it does sit quite high. I didn't realise how high it was, and obviously I use it 8 hours a day for my office job. And I have to admit, after a while, I did feel a bit of rubbing towards the end, and I don't know what it is, because with my gaming mice, which are much lower profile, it felt like more even on my palm, but with the Logitech MX Master 3 because with it being higher and supposedly more ergonomic, sometimes I felt that there was a little bit more pressure in the corner of my wrists. So with this mouse wrist rest, it levels the playing field almost like if it was a gaming mouse, and it just feels much more comfortable. Now you can probably tell where I'm going with this because I have actually used it with my other mouse, which is the Razer Basilisk Ultimate, and I have to admit it's not the same experience. In general, I wouldn't recommend it for gaming at all because obviously with your quick swiping movements, it's just going to be so irritating, so it's not designed for gaming. But even with the low profile gaming mouse, I don't know, it felt so much more noticeable and it felt so much larger on my wrist that I actually found it after a while a bit frustrating. It wasn't necessarily uncomfortable, it was just very much more obvious. Whereas with the MX Master, with it being a higher profile sat on my hand, it definitely didn't have the same feeling. So maybe one thing I would say is look at what mouse that you own and maybe look at its profile. Like if you've got like an Apple Magic mouse or another mouse that is very low profile, just be aware that obviously the wrist rest is going to almost sit level with it. Whereas if you've got a much taller mouse, I think this will be much more comfortable. So the product itself comes in two sizes, small and large obviously. The way they say if you don't have a tape measure, the way they say to measure how big your palm is to get a credit card and place that in your palm. And obviously if your palm is bigger than the credit card, then you should get a large. And if the credit card is going over the edges of your palm, then you should get a small one. I actually went for a large. When you actually look at the dimensions, there isn't much in it. So I would recommend having a quick look, but I wouldn't get too hung up on the sizes because it's only maybe about 1 millimeter higher and 1 millimeter wider. So we're talking like quite small numbers here. So it's not going to be a drastic change, but I know naturally I have quite large hands. So naturally for me, it was quite easy to go for the large. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that I'm currently using this wrist rest on top of a mouse mat on my desk. I have tried it without the mouse mat, and even though it does have gliding feet underneath to help the smoothness, there is a bit of noise, so just bear that in mind. Not only would you have the mouse rolling across the table, but you're also going to have the wrist rest rubbing at the same time, which obviously could irritate you a little bit. So personally, for my preference, I would always recommend using this on top of a mouse mat because then you're going to get a nice gliding feel and you're not going to get any kind of annoying noise. So one really cool feature of the wrist rest is the actual rubber pads are replaceable, so you can easily just pop them off, and if they're worn over time you can just order some more. One little gripe I did have is the fact that these pads seem to come off rather quite easily, and there's been a few times where I've just picked it up from the corners and they quickly popped off. So it would have been nicer if it would have been a bit harder to take these pads off, but like I said, that's a major gripe. Generally, if you pick it up like a normal person, you won't have that issue. It also comes in two colors. It comes in space gray / like a black gray, and it also comes in white. Again, I think that's two great design choices. It very much appeals to the MacBook Pro / productivity, creativity in people. So I'm very happy with the colors. It looks great on any desk. So if we're going to get on to price, the wrist rest costs €29.90, so basically about 30 euros. And then also you've got postage on top of that. I paid for the 1 to 3 business days with DHL, so I actually paid another 9 euros. So altogether my total came to 39 euros. So let's just call it 40 euros for ease. That is quite expensive for a wrist rest, I have to admit, and that might turn a few people away, which I understand. Overall, I would say that is quite steep for a wrist rest, although I do appreciate what the company is trying to do. They've come out with something really quite unique, and like I said before, when you look on Amazon and you look at mouse wrist rests, you don't really see anything like this. So I can understand with all the work that they've put behind it, why they would justify that price. So this mouse wrist rest is basically designed for anyone really that does any sort of creativity or office job. I would easily recommend it to anyone that does long hours at the desk. It feels super comfortable. I've used it for many hours of the day, and not once have I ever felt any kind of rubbing or annoyance with it being there. I wouldn't recommend it for gaming like I mentioned, so if you are predominantly a gamer, then maybe give it a miss. But if you do any sort of long hours at your desk, then this is an absolute winner. Alright, that's going to wrap up this really quick, easy review. I highly recommend you check out this company. I'll leave the link in the bio below. Like I said, I found these guys on Instagram. I don't know how long they've been going for, but I'm really impressed with what they've done so far. I'd love to see a 2.0 version and what they could improve on. I think overall, if you get this wrist rest, you're going to be really happy with your product. If you have any questions in the comments, please let me know. Anything I might have missed out on, any of the questions, I'll be happy to answer them as fast as I can. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully see you next time. Bye.